Next talk is going to be on, our next talk is titled From the Body to the Being, the Odyssey of Hayy ibn Yaqzan. And I would not do it justice by describing what it is actually all about, but I will introduce Dr. Noman-ul-Haq, who will actually be leading this talk.
Okay, you can hear me, right? Yeah, thank you very much. Professor Muazzam whispered in my ear that I should weigh in, and I'm so tempted to talk about Ibn-e-Sina. I've written about him, and I was a student of Dimitri Guterres, whose book was displayed by our speaker. You know, this question of language is something that is very close to my heart. And it is really, really a tragedy that we have lost languages. You know, the attempt to ground Ibn-e-Sina, and I'm not going to talk about Ibn-e-Sina more than a couple of minutes, perhaps, to ground Ibn-e-Sina totally in the Greek tradition is something highly misleading. Ibn-e-Sina as a philosopher actually veers away from Aristotle. And it is for this reason that his logical works are not known very much in Latin. And I edit a series for Oxford, Studies in Islamic Philosophy, and we had the first translation of his logical works into English in, I think, about 3 or 4 years ago. This is the first time it has come into a translated form. It was never translated because it veers away from Aristotle. And actually, Ibn-e-Sina is a watershed. He's a watershed. And to credit Greeks with everything is something that has to be revisited. But I'm thankful to the speaker for being so, generous with us and giving us. I know little about Ibn-e-Sina's medical contributions, but they are enormous. میں بہت ممنون ہوں ڈاکٹر معظم کا کہ انہوں نے مجھے اس بات کا موقع دیا کہ میں آپ سے گفتگو کروں. اور ہمارے معاشرے میں، پاکستانی معاشرے میں جو مناسبت شاعری سے ہے وہ مشکل ہی سے کسی اور معاشرے میں ہے. تو جب کوئی شعر پڑھا جاتا ہے تو لوگ فوراً متوجہ ہو جاتے ہیں. تو یہ غالب کا ایک شعر ہے کہ بلبل کے کاروبار پہ ہیں خند ہائے گل، کہتے ہیں جس کو عشق خلل ہے دماغ کا، کہتے ہیں جس کو عشق خلل ہے دماغ کا. And this is Ibn-e-Sina making his appearance in Ghalib. Now, as for, I'll just speak for a few minutes in English and then in Urdu, and then I will shift to English as I ought to. میں یہ جو کانفرنس آپ کی ہو رہی ہے اس میں اتنی رنگا رنگی ہے، شاعری بھی ہے اور تاریخ بھی ہے اور فلسفہ بھی ہے اور اخلاقیات کی براہ راست باتیں بھی ہیں. تو مجھے یاد آ رہا تھا اور میں یہ اس لیے بیان کر رہا ہوں تاکہ وہ مجھے آپ لوگوں کی توجہ مل جائے. مجھے یاد ہے کہ 2008 میں کیمبرج میں ایک کانفرنس ہوئی اقبال پر، کیونکہ 100 سال ہو گئے تھے ان کو کیمبرج سے واپس آئے ہوئے. تو صبح سے شام تک لوگ پیپرز پڑھ رہے تھے اور سب بور ہو رہے تھے بہت بری طرح. کوئی اونگ رہا تھا، کوئی کھڑے ہو کے جا رہا، کسی کو بار بار باتھ روم جانا پڑ رہا تھا. یہ بھی علامت ہے اس کی کہ توجہ نہیں ہے. بار بار لوگ جا رہے تھے تو اور کسی نے ایک مصرع بھی نہیں پڑھا. یہ عجیب بدقسمتی ہے، بدنصیبی ہے اقبال کی. اور زبانوں کا جو معاملہ آپ نے کیا ہے، زبان سے بھی اتنی دوری ہو چکی ہے کہ کسی نے نہیں پڑھا. سارا دن گزر گیا. پھر وہ میری باری آئی مجھ بدنصیب کی، تو میں نے شعر سے ہی بات شروع کی. تجھے یاد کیا رہی ہے میرے دل کا وہ زمانہ، وہ ادب گہے محبت، وہ نگاہ کا تازیانہ. یہ اچانک زندگی دوڑ گئی، پورے آڈینس سب کی توجہ ہو گئی. تو بہرحال یہ ڈاکٹر معظم نے جو یہ برپا کی ہے محفل اتنی عظیم، تو وہ مجھے یاد آ رہا تھا کہ نون میم راشد ان کی ایک نظم ہے، میر ہو مرزا ہو میرا جی ہو، میر ہو مرزا ہو میرا جی ہو. تو اس میں انہوں نے مرزا غالب، مرزا سے مراد ہے مرزا غالب کا ایک شعر اس میں انہوں نے لکھا ہے کہ مدعا محو تماشائے شکستے دل ہے. ذرا سا مشکل ہے مگر توجہ ضروری ہے غالب کے لیے. مدعا محو تماشائے شکستے دل ہے، آئینہ خانے میں کوئی لیے جاتا ہے مجھے. आईना खाने में कोई लिए जाता है मुझे. तो ये आईना खाना ही तो है. This is like a tapestry of different colors. And you know, it's very, very appropriate. Yesterday we heard about what is the calamities suffered by the women of Sindh. And women of Sindh often do these beautiful tapestries. And I have a collection of them in my house, which I got from Zebun-Nisa market. Very, very nice. So it is a tapestry. And here we are going to talk about Hayy ibn Yaqzan. I wrote an article about Hayy ibn Yaqzan in Dawn many, many years ago. And I'm so fortunate that Professor Moazzam is an avid reader of mine, and she always sends me a note. My most recent article on Jeremy Bentham and Kala Pani, that connection, she wrote to me, and I was very, very, very grateful to her. Can we have that first slide? This is the image that Dawn used for my article. This is Robinson Crusoe, and this is a musical score based on the story of Robinson Crusoe. Now, I should say a word about Ibn-Tufayl, who is the author of this philosophical novel called Hayy ibn Yaqzan. It's an interesting title. Hayy means living. Ibn Yaqzan, the son of awake. Living, the son of awake. In fact, the modern translator of Hayy ibn Yaqzan, Len Goodman, whose book I have and Professor Moazzam has brought a better edition of that book with her, he translated it as awake son, son of the awake. Ibn Yaqzan, son of the awake. This was written by Ibn Tufayl. Ibn Tufayl is from Seville, which was actually the capital, the center of the Almohad, what we call Almohad Empire. Almohad. In fact, you know, we don't have languages, you see. So, a woman wrote a book about Iqbal, and she kept saying Almohad and Al-Muravis and Al-Muhad. तो मैंने उनसे पूछा कि बीबी अल-मुहद है क्या ये दिस तो कह ली भाई मुझे तो नहीं मालूम तो उनको नहीं मालूम तो अल-मुहद अल-मुवहिदून और अल-मुराबितून अल-मुराविज तो अल-मुहद अल-मुवहिदून they were ruling from Seville. This was after the breakup of the Umayyad Caliphate in Cordoba. It was at that time. And let me also tell you for your interest that Ibn Arabi, the famous Sufi, is also from the same region. Now, if I give you the outline of the story of Hayy ibn Yaqzan, you will find it very familiar. You will find it very familiar not because we know about Hayy ibn Yaqzan. Perhaps many of you have never heard of it, and I will not be surprised if you haven't. If I give you the outline of the story, you will find it very familiar. And you will find it familiar not because we know Hayy ibn Yaqzan, but because it has seeped through in world culture. And the transmission is so full-bodied that we know it is all around us. It's part of our literary consciousness. This is the story of a human baby born in an uninhabited island. And the tide sweeps away the baby, and it ends up in a thicket, in a forest. And the baby gets hungry and starts crying. And so a gazelle who has lost her own baby hears the cries of the human baby, goes to her and starts suckling it. So a human being suckled by a gazelle, a feral human being, grows up. And he grows up among animals where there are no human beings, totally non-human population. And then you see there is a development, intellectual development. Now you know the Jungle Book story. This is from Robinson Crusoe. That again. These are stories that have been inspired by Hayy ibn Yaqzan. We do not realize how much the modern culture owes its characteristics from the Arabic tradition. I would rather go the other way. And we have the Robinson Crusoe story, the Jungle Book story. It comes from Hayy ibn Yaqzan. Hayy ibn Yaqzan actually is the first philosophical novel. It is a philosophical novel, and then you see the unfolding of the life of this child who grows up among animals, and then we have he finds the truths about nature, about the cosmos, about ethics, about morality, about his own inner being, about other beings around him, and they're all non-human beings, and ultimately God. So there's this unfolding, and this was very, very, very pertinent in the age of reason, because he does all of it through the powers of his own rational faculties. And in fact, this work, Hayy ibn Yaqzan, which was translated into Latin, and don't you get surprised that the manuscripts are all in Europe? We talk about a manuscript in Yale, in Bodleian. In fact, the earliest manuscript is in Bodleian, in Oxford, and it was translated from that Oxford manuscript into Latin. This was quite a while ago. I think, I have it was done by Edward Pocock in 1671 from the Bodleian manuscript. And then 3 years after that, we have an English translation, and then in 1686, we have another English translation done by George Ashwell. And then we have the first English translation in 1710, which was done directly from Arabic, Simon Oakley's translation. And from Simon Oakley, we come to the 20th century, and Len Goodman has a very good translation. We have a translation, a very nice translation, a very good introduction, and I really urge you to look at it. We have Latin translations, we have Hebrew translations, we have English translations, we have Spanish translations, we have Dutch translations, and we also have translations in Southeast Asian languages, in the region of Malaysia and Indonesia and so on. So the transmission is so full-bodied that we have translations, paraphrases, shadows, and adaptations all over the place. And I'll talk a little bit in detail about that in a minute. Okay, now let me tell you something about the nature of the story. As I said, that this human being, he discovers the truth about the world, about himself, about his own morality, and ultimately about God through the use of his own rational faculties, without any external teacher. And this book was presented as a pioneer work in autodidactism, self-teaching. So you learn without any external teacher. You learn through your own rational faculties. And there is this very interesting series of deductions that he makes. So when his mother, Gazelle, dies, he does not know what has happened to her. And he feels that there is something that has hindered somewhere her life, and if he removes that, she will come back to life only through reason. And then he decides somehow or the other, he decides to cut open her chest. He in fact develops surgical instruments, crude instruments from the wood of the forest and so on. He cuts open, and then he finds the chamber of the heart. Now here he moves totally as a biologist, observations and conclusions, and observations and then deductions. He does that, and ultimately he reaches the heart. And the very, very interesting thing, let me tell you, I mean, these, things are found in very strange places. So, for example, I mean, I'm in fact giving you my footnotes as I go along. People say कि हाँ देखें जी मदारिस में तो साइंस पढ़ाई नहीं जाती थी, उसके बाद वो तो खाली फ़िक़्ह और ये वो पढ़ाते थे. I mean, they don't know that the problem lies with the classification. Linguistic philosophy is found in legal writings. Linguistic philosophy is found in legal writings. If you look at Aristotle, people don't even know Aristotle. If you look at Aristotle categories, it begins with grammatical discourses. It begins with grammatical synonyms and homonyms and so on. This is how it begins. His categories, the major work in logic by Aristotle. So you'll find this linguistic philosophy, for example, in legal works. So if you have a legal theory, usul al-fiqh, a legal theory, if you look at that, the title will tell you that it has to do with law, but it has linguistic philosophy in it. So similarly, there is a scientific content also in Hayy ibn Yaqzan. So when he cuts open the chest, and there is also a philosophical shift, and the philosophical leap is very interesting. He cuts open the chest, and then he dissects the heart. And in the galenic system, the blood moves from one ventricle to another ventricle of the heart through pores, through pores. And when he opens the heart, he finds that one ventricle is totally dry and empty, and the other is sanguineous, other has blood. And so he, in fact, Hayy ibn Yaqzan talks about pulmonary circulation of blood. This is an amazing discovery he makes. Pulmonary circulation should come through the lungs back to the heart. Now, to expect this in a book of fiction is something quite mind-boggling. So in fact, he is a predecessor of Ibn Nafis, who later on discusses the pulmonary circulation of blood, and then that reaches to William Harvey and so on. So let me tell you that the process throughout, students come to me, how we are, the savages, the ravages of time and history. Students come to me and they say, "Sir, is Islam compatible with rationality?" And I don't know how to answer that. I don't know how to answer it. The entire thrust, I mean, Marshall Hodgson, one of the greatest historians of Islam, Marshall Hodgson, he talks about the unmistakable rational thrust of Islam. Now, this whole thing is highly rational. So you have observations, and then you make conclusions, and there is a scientific method in the whole thing. Now, as for the birth of this baby, that is not explained in transcendental terms, but in naturalistic terms. Confluence of elements, and the mud of the shore, and certain elements. So the explanation is not transcendental. It is totally rational in terms of natural forces. This is how the thrust is. And he mixes the Quranic references also within his scientific discourse. The story of Moses, that Moses was placed in a little ark, and then the tides took him away, and he was found later, which is something that appears in the I think in the 28th chapter of the Quran. فَإِذَا خِفْتِ عَلَيْهِ فَأَلْقِيهِ فِي الْيَمِّ. If you worry about him, فَإِذَا خِفْتِ عَلَيْهِ فَأَلْقِيهِ فِي الْيَمِّ. Throw him, commit him to the sea, commit him to the river. And this is what happens, that he floats in the river, and then he ends up in that thicket, in that forest. Now, I will talk. I'm so full of it that I don't know where to start. But anyway, I will. If you have any questions, I hope you do. Then you can provoke me to speak more. Now, what is the importance of this text? It should be remembered that, I mean, it has philosophical value, it has literary value, and it has a value in human history. Now, let me tell you that in this story, what happens that Hayy discovers God. You know, and he goes through reason. Everything is dependent for its existence on something else. Ultimately, we reach an entity which is dependent on nothing, but everything is dependent on him, and that is God. And this is very Avicennan. It's very Avicennan. Ibn-e-Sina talks about this, the term wajibul wujud, necessary of existence. Wajibul wujud, the necessary of existence, and he uses that term wajib. And then there is this. Sufi leap, and he says, Hua, he is he, which is very, very much of a Sufi cry. Because you see, there's no way you can describe God, because whenever you describe God, you talk in terms of things that are trapped in space and time. So what do? You say, he is he. Hua. This is something very, very common among the Sufis. They say he is he is Hua. So the philosophical question of reason and revelation. If reason can yield all the truths, then what is the need for revelation? Why do we need prophets? If I can reach the truth only through the exercise of my rational capacities, why do I need prophecy? Why do I need external teachers? This is a central problem in Islamic philosophy. Ibn-e-Sina deals with it, and Farabi deals with it, this question of reason and revelation. And what happens, and this is expressed in fictional terms, that Hayy meets somebody who comes from an island where there was a prophet, there was an apostle. And then they compare notes. Hayy ibn Yaqzan, who is self-taught, totally self-taught, he compares notes with this person who comes from another island, and they found that they are identical. Their conclusions are identical. So what he arrives at the truths are the same as the truths that this person from the other island human being finds through the teaching of a prophet. So reason and revelation are equivalent. This is a central conclusion in Islamic philosophy, that the reason, and it is basically in Farabi, reason and revelation are equivalent. So what the prophet tells you through parables and stories, reason tells you through logical arguments. But of course, they keep the prophet higher, because the prophet gets it through inspiration, through active intellect. There's a notion of active intellect in Islamic philosophy. Al-aql al-fa'al al-awwal, the first active intellect, which is Dr. Muazzam for CBEC. She is the first active intellect. Everything radiates from Dr. Muazzam. So al-aql al-fa'al al-awwal, they get it through that, whereas the philosopher has to go through logical steps and logical reasoning, and the prophet gets it instantly. But the conclusions are identical. This is something very interesting. The other question is the question of eternity of the world, which he discusses. Is the world eternal, or is it come into being at a certain point in time? This is a central problem in Islamic philosophy, but then he moves away from that. Now, there are 4 stages of the development of this human being. And this is something that Rousseau in Emile, takes over on education. The first phase, there are 4 phases. The first phase is the phase of childhood's frustration, that he desires things without having the means to have them. So if he's hungry, but he cannot create milk, he does not know how to get it, so the mother gazelle does it for him. And then there is a stage of practical reason. And then he raises his being, he ascends to the stage of practical reason, and then from there to wisdom. Wisdom means that you ask questions and you have no answers to them, but you ask questions. So you end up in wonder. So he ends up in wonder. And in the this is from frustrations to practical reason to metaphysics and to wonder. So that and then let me also just a few more things. There are a couple of more things that I should point out. One is that it is said that the John Locke. I'm sure most of you have heard of John Locke, the father of empiricism. He knew the Latin translation. He read the Latin translation of Hayy ibn Yaqzan, and his theory of tabula rasa, mind at birth, is a slate, is a blank slate, and experience then gives us its knowledge. Now, this whole thing about autodidactism, self-learning through the reason, this is very much in line with that. So John Locke is influenced by him. And so two more things. Can we show John Locke? I just wanted to keep it a little visual. I have an image of John Locke, a very interesting. Now, can you? This is John Locke. Kahan John Locke or kahan Hayy ibn Yaqzan of Ibn-Tufayl. Two more things. One is that मुझे याद है कि I hope that you allow me to veer into Urdu here and there. और ये है कि about 3 or 4 years ago, I was contacted by Karachi Literature Festival people, and they said that we want to talk about Dante's influence on Iqbal. And I said that I think that this is a question that needs investigation. Is there influence of Dante on Iqbal? That is the question. You cannot presume that there is, and I think that there isn't. Yes, of course there is a similarity between Iqbal and Dante. But Iqbal and Dante, they are similar because they are drawing upon the same sources. The Kitab al-Mi'raj is one of them. Kitab al-Mi'raj, the ascension of the Prophet into the heavens, which is in Surah Isra in the Quran. That was translated into Latin, and Dante had recourse to it. So they both draw upon the Kitab al-Mi'raj, and there is massive body of literature on the heavenly journey. People don't know about it. So in fact, they were both drawing upon the same sources, both Iqbal and Dante, hence there is similarity. But I don't think there is a direct influence of Dante on Iqbal. We have no evidence. But then coming to Dante, Dante's description of heaven is actually almost identical with the vision that Hayy has of the paradise. So he Hayy ibn Yaqzan was translated in Hebrew as well. And I told you, the Latin and German and English and Hebrew and so on, Dutch. And that was known, somebody has written a paper on that was known to Dante. So you can see the influence. In fact, people say that Hayy ibn Yaqzan became the bestseller of its time. There was so much about it, and stories and paraphrases and shadows and reconstructions and so on and so forth. Now, one final remark I want to make is the fact that Hayy ibn Yaqzan grows up among non-human beings, plants and animals. And so Hayy has an environmental sensitivity which is really very, very relevant to us today. The environmental sensitivity that he has, he finds similarities, resemblances between him and the stars. And then he says, I should be like stars. I should be like stars, clean, shiny, bright, upright, regular. I should be like the stars. So the more I promote this resemblance with nature, the better I am. So this whole thing about the thing about nature, because he grows up and he has a sympathy with nature, and it is not biased by any human community. So these are many aspects of Hayy ibn Yaqzan. And somebody asked the question concerning Ibn-e-Sina, why we don't know Ibn-e-Sina. We have been separated. We have lost that legacy. In fact, this is. I mean, I don't want to be parochial. It is not Muslim legacy or Arabic legacy. It is world legacy. It is part of world culture. So we have lost that. We have lost Ibn-e-Sina. Nobody knows about Ibn-e-Sina. And nobody knows about the fact that we have this thing called Hayy ibn Yaqzan, a novel, a story, a work of fiction. And it is very important also in the history of literature. We have lost that. And what do? I think we need to recover. We need to learn languages. Without that, nothing will happen. Many people don't realize that the very best academic institution in the world is supposed to be Harvard. And Harvard gives its degrees not in English, but in Latin. Why Latin? Why Latin? All Ivy League schools give their degrees in Latin. Why Latin? And मुझे याद है कि the language is so important that I used to teach Kashful Mahjoob of Data Sahab in Brown in Persian. And I had American students who knew Farsi. And if I would give a lecture and say, is there anybody who knows Latin, there'll be like 50% of the kids, undergraduates who know Latin. So why? I mean, we have to keep the legacy, the world legacy, not parochial. It is world legacy. So we have lost not only Ibn-e-Sina, but also this, and we do not know the the linkages. Dante is so much talked about, but Dante is very much grounded not only in Hayy ibn Yaqzan, but also in Kitab al-Mi'raj. And there are studies, there are people who have written about it, and also in Abu al-Ala Marri. Abu al-Ala Marri is an Arabic poet, and Iqbal has written a beautiful, beautiful poem on Abu al-Ala Marri. कहते हैं कभी गोश्त न खाता था मार्री फल फूल पे करता था हमेशा गुज़र औक़ात. यह है नज़्म कि उनकी जो शेर तो बहुत वेरी वेरी फेमस के तकदीर के काजी का ये फतवा है अज़ल से है जुर्म ज़ईफ़ी की सज़ा मर्ग मफाजात. This is from Abu al-Ala Marri. Abu al-Ala Marri is more or less copied verbatim by Dante, and how ironic it is that he uses the means of the enemy whom he is vilifying. I remember a cartoon long ago that there was this man who is put in a cauldron, big pan, and he is supposed to be boiled to death, and underneath there are logs of wood. And then the person who's supposed to light the fire, he goes to the condemned and says, do you have matches? So actually taking the matches from the enemy and then lighting the fire. It's amazing. I mean, I cannot tell you how despicable the description of some of the most sacred figures of Muslims is in the Divine Comedy. I cannot even repeat it. It was hair raising. It will give you shudders. The way and the level is that of little kids, junior level kids, 5-year-old kids. They talk about this, that you have this under your belt and you have this under your pants, this kind of thing in Dante. So Dante takes it from Hayy ibn Yaqzan, from the Kitab al-Mi'raj. But for that you don't need languages, for God's sake. You cannot. You just cannot just do it. So I think I'm going to end here. There is so much to talk about, and I'm, waiting for you. I hope that I have provoked you. In fact, I needed to provoke you, and you can just ask questions if I can answer them, or provoke me to say more. Are we doing okay for time?
Okay, Dr. Rubina?
Ji, Dr. Rubina.
Thank you. मैं बोलूँ दूसरे को। अच्छा, हम जब
जी
इकबाल के बारे में जब पढ़ते हैं, और जो जितना मेरा थोड़ा बहुत महदूद सा मुताला है, तो बहुत ज़्यादा उनका ज़िक्र गोइटे के साथ और इनके साथ मिलता है। उनके जो फ़िक्री वो है, और उसका कंपैरिजन्स इकबाल और गोइटे के बहुत मिलते हैं। आज जब मैंने आपसे दांते के और उनके फ़िक्री कंपैरिजन्स या सिमिलैरिटीज़ की बात सुनी, तो थोड़ा सा मुझे, क्योंकि दांते जो एक इटालियन और उनसे काफ़ी पहले के वक्त के हिसाब हैं, तो इस पे थोड़ा सा और मुझे आपसे वजाहत।
देखिए, यस, जहाँ तक गोइटे का ताल्लुक़ नुसरत इक़बाल का है राब्ता, उन्होंने, आप जानती हैं इस बात को कि उनकी जो है पैम मशरक़ तो है ही, इट इज़ एड्रेस्ड, फिर तो ख़िताब ही किया इक़बाल ने गोइटे से। और मेरा एक मज़मून है, दांते ने एक नात भी लिखी थी, गोइटे ने एक नात भी लिखी थी, और उसका इतना, इक़बाल बहुत बड़े शायर हैं। इक़बाल को भी हम लोग नहीं जानते ना, इक़बाल को हम लोग नहीं जानते, बिल्कुल नहीं जानते, बिल्कुल ज़बान से इतनी दूरी हो गई है। और वो है फ़ारसी में जो नज़्म है, नात है गोइटे की, उसका नहायत खूबसूरत तर्जुमा इक़बाल ने किया। बिन घर के जुए आप चे मस्ताना मीरावत मानिंदे कहकशां बगिरे बान मरग़ज़ार जी बहरे बेकरान चे मस्तान मीरावत, इंतहाई खूबसूरत। और उस पर मेरा मज़मून में मुझे यकीन है कि मेरी मुरब्बी डॉक्टर मुअज़्ज़म ने मज़मून पढ़ा होगा। मेरा मज़मून है गोइटे की इस नज़्म पर, और इक़बाल का मैंने कोट भी किया सारा का सारा, वो फ़ारसी का तर्जुमा। तो गोइटे से तो उनको ताल्लुक़ है, हमको पता है गोइटे और नीचे। लेकिन जहाँ तक ताल्लुक़ इस बात का है, देखिए हम लोग इस बात से बिल्कुल नावाकिफ़ हैं कि कितना बड़ा सरमाया अरबी में है किताबुल मेराज का और आसमानी सफ़र का, बहुत है, बहुत है। और लैटिन में भी है, लैटिन में किताबुल मेराज का बहुत जल्दी तर्जुमा हो गया था। और अगर आप पढ़ें अबुल अला मार्री को और इनको क्या नाम है, हय्य इब्न यक़ज़ान को, तो दे आर आइडेंटिकल। वही यूज़, उन्हीं से मैचेस मांग के उन्हीं को आग लगाई उन्होंने, ये किया। और मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ कि वो इस कदर तकलीफ़ दे है, यानी मैं अपने किसी दुश्मन के बारे में ऐसी बात नहीं कहूँगा कि मैं किसी के मुक़द्दस हस्तियों को इस तरह मैं उनकी इतनी इस कदर तहक़ीर करूँ जैसी दांते ने की है। बहुत ज़्यादा तहक़ीर की उन्होंने।
Dr. Muazzam?
Thank you very much for a very nice, precise, concise, जो essence है, the essence of the book. Professor Noman-ul-Haq Sahab, can you talk a little bit more about the most interesting thing for me is kitab mein that you've referred to, which is going back to the issue of reason versus the divine. Yes, versus revelation. As I read this book, and as you allude to it, the human in this particular novel goes through, as you said, different stages, which philosophically also has been talked about, reaching eventually to where you reach the stage of maybe becoming a Sufi. The conversation between the protagonist here, and when he does meet somebody who has actually, so he has reached this level on the silent by himself without any external influences. It's through his own study. And when he meets somebody who is again searching, but has gone through the community, through prophecy, through other thing, And when they meet, because you look at metaphors also, the book says when they meet, they cannot understand each other. Can you focus a little bit more on what are your views? This is something that is very relevant to our society, which is reason. What is the role of reason versus the role of prophecy, etc.? Can the two meet? And how does he actually, in this book, he tries to bring the two together? Because us zamane mein, in those days, he had to eventually somehow bring them together. So between revelation and reason, could you give us some your ideas on in all your studies?
Well, I mean, as I said, that this is a central problem in Islamic philosophy.
Yeah.
This reason versus revelation, and the resolution, for example, of Farabi is that reason and revelation are identical. Really, they yield identical truths. What the prophet tells us is in terms of parables and stories. The philosopher tells us in terms of logical conclusions. So they are equivalent. What reason yields is the same thing as what prophet tells us. So there is no clash between reason and revelation. They are equivalent. This is the resolution that they have. And it has its I mean, you know, whenever you look at things deeply, there are questions, there are problems. So there are problems with this, but this is how they resolve the issue, that they are the same. But of course, you know, being in the Islamic milieu, they somehow raise the level of the prophet, because the prophet knows it instantly through some kind of a connection through wahi or active intellect, whereas the philosopher takes a long time because he or she goes through logical reasoning and then comes to the conclusion. But the conclusion is the same. Now, as for the language of this character called Asal, who comes from another island, in fact, Asal teaches Hayy his language, and then they are able to converse. In the beginning, there's a fight between them. And in fact, Hayy uses brute force, and he lived among animals, so he has brute force. He uses brute force to subdue Asal. And then Asal teaches him, his natural human language, which he learns, and then they're able to have a conversation. So there is no, the resolution is that there is no clash between reason and revelation. They are equivalent. And yet, revelation is higher in the Islamic milieu because of his instant linkage with God.
Can I?
Ji, I have a question. Is it your name
Yes,
is Fareed?
Fareed, and then I.
Fareed ji, बताइए.
आपने अपनी रिसर्च में you would have read इब्न नफीस का जो आपने
जरा करीब कर लें अपना माइक.
इब्न नफीस का आपने जिक्र किया जो इनके बाद है, एंड ही रोट रिसाला कामिला. इसी तरह की एक बिल्कुल उन्होंने भी फिक्शन का काम लिखा, लेकिन his work was completely in a different direction from what he was describing about the theory of knowledge और कहाँ से आती है, और उनके नज़दीक जो है वो इब्न नफीस जो डॉक्टर साहब ने भी जिक्र किया, he also wrote a similar work of fiction like Hayy ibn Yaqzan, और वो रिसाला कामिला के नाम से है. उसमें भी इसी तरह आइलैंड पे एक बच्चा है और वो बड़ा होता है, एंड उनका कंक्लूजन ये है कि जो खुदा है या नबी की दावत है या रिलीजन है या इस तरह के बड़े हक़ाइक़ हैं, उनके लिए देयर इज़ अ नीड ऑफ अदर पीपल टू टेल यू अबाउट गॉड, और वो आता है नबी के ज़रिए खुदा के पास से. लेकिन बाकी सारी चीज़ें जैसे हय्य इब्न यक़ज़ान जो है वो डिस्कवर करता है थ्रू एम्पेरिकल नॉलेज, वो भी बॉटनिकल नॉलेज वो देखता है, फलों को, पत्तों को और जानवरों को, और उनसे वो साइंटिफिक नॉलेज तो ले रहा होता है, बट एट द एंड जब वो खुदा और रसूल की बात आती है तो he has to go to another human society to learn about knowledge of God and rationality, morality वगैरह.
ये बात आपकी दुरुस्त नहीं है कि he doesn't have to go to another society to learn about it. He learns it by himself even before Asal arrives from the other island, which has seen a prophet. وہ پہلے سے اس کو وہ ڈسکوری اس کی ہو چکی ہوتی ہے, اس کی دریافت خدا کی اور وہ پہلے ہی کر چکا ہوتا ہے, تو وہاں جا کے نہیں بلکہ خود ہی اپنے ہی زور پر اپنی عقلی اور فکری ذرائع کو وسائل کو استعمال کرتے ہوئے وہ اس نتیجے پہ پہنچ جاتا ہے کہ خدا موجود ہے. کیونکہ وہ جو دلیلیں دی جاتی ہیں جیسے ابن سینا کے یہاں بھی ہیں, اور ابن سینا کا نام بھی لیا انہوں نے, کہ جو دلیلیں دی جاتی ہیں جیسے کہ میں نے کہا کہ ایک دلیل یہ ہے نا کہ ہر چیز جو ہے وہ منحصر ہے اپنے وجود کے لیے, میرے لیے آکسیجن آپ بند کر دیں گے تو میں مر جاؤں گا, آکسیجن کے لیے کیا ضروری ہے, سو ہوتے یو گو اپ ٹو اے پوائنٹ where there is an entity which does not need anything for its subsistence but has to be there, جس کو واجب الوجود کہا ہے ابن سینا نے, واجب الوجود, تو واجب الوجود, تو this is the kind of argument he goes to. لیکن اس میں بھی تو ہزاروں مسائل ہیں نا, اتنا آسان تو نہیں ہے. یہ برٹن رسل کی ایک کتاب ہے Why I am not a Christian, جس میں یہ ایگزامن کرتے ہیں اس طرح کے آرگیومنٹ, سب کو توڑ دیتے ہیں, وہ سب میں وہ نکال دیتے ہیں خرابیاں. تو اس میں تھوڑا سا ایک ہے تو ایک یعنی there is a mischief here on the part of Ibn-Tufayl کہ one can easily through reason end up in a polytheistic system. Why one توحید کا مسئلہ وہ یعنی his reason yields an Islamic position, تو it could yield some other position too, تو وہ تو ہے نا, تو اس میں اندر وہ یعنی بھرپور طریقے مکمل طور سے وہ اپنی قوتوں سے تو نہیں انہوں نے حاصل کیا, بلکہ وہ ایک ہے ان کے ایک اس میں there is a belief system, اس میں ایک faith تو اس میں موجود ہے. تو یہ تو I don't think this is fair, because why did he end up in particularly Islamic conclusions? It could have been Hindu conclusions too. تو دلیل سے تو بات نہیں بنتی نا, اے مسلمان اپنے دل سے پوچھ, ملا سے نہ پوچھ.
سوال اس میں
اے مسلمان اپنے دل سے پوچھ, ملا سے نہ پوچھ. دس از اقبال.
سوال اس میں یہ تھا کہ ابن نفیس کا جو ورک ہے why didn't it get as popular in the West as حی ابن یقظان, ابن نفیس کا جو فکشن ہے.
ایک تو اس میں کئی باتیں ہیں. دیکھیے ایک اب یہ آپ لوگ اتنے بڑے بڑے سوالات کرتے ہیں, اس کے لیے مجھے I need to be a prophet to answer those questions. I cannot paint murals. I can paint miniatures. Murals نہیں پینٹ کر سکتا اتنے بڑے سوالات کے لیے مجھے رسول ہونا پڑے گا. دیکھیں why, because ایک تو یہ کہ the dynamics of society has changed, first of all, and secondly the great thing about Hayy ibn Yaqzan is that it is a book of fiction. اس کو آپ ڈراماٹائز بھی آپ دیکھ رہے ہیں نا, یہ جو رابنسن کروزو اینڈ جنگل بک سیریز of Kipling, it has those possibilities. جیسے کہ آپ لوگ شعر سنتے ہیں تو سب متوجہ ہو جاتے, کیوں ہو جاتے ہیں, وہی میں نثر میں بیان کروں گا تو اتنی توجہ آپ کو نہیں ہوگی. تو اس کے تو ایک فکشن ہے, وہ کہانی ہے, داستان ہے, اور کہانی کا اپنا ایک وجود ہوتا ہے نا, اس کی اپنی اپیل ہے. تو ایک بات تو یہ. دوسری بات یہ ہے کہ ابن نفیس بعد کے ہیں, اور ابن نفیس بیسیکلی is a biologist. He's a madrasa trained, by the way, I repeat, he's a madrasa trained biologist. ایک زمانہ تھا جب کہ those physicians were actually, they're Hellenistic, where then later on they all come from madaris. Ibn Baytar and Ibn Nafis, they are from madaris. فقہ کی کتابیں میں انہوں نے لکھی ہیں. تو وہ he is basically, ان کے یہاں وہ نہیں ہے, I mean کہ جو فکشن کی جو اپیل ہے وہ ان کے یہاں نہیں ہے, تو نہیں ہوا. اور پھر یہ زمانہ ان کا ہے جب ٹرانسلیشنس ہو رہے تھے, بیکاز حی ابن یقظان, ابن-تفیل از فرام دا 12th century, which is way early, اور اس بہت بعد کے ہیں ابن نفیس. تو دور اور تھا, اور پھر فکشن نہیں تھا, فکشن کی بھی تو اپیل ہوتی ہے نا. جی.
So I actually have a connected question to the fiction, if that's okay.
جی.
So, I mean, connected to that, I think storytelling, as you rightly mentioned, is such an important aspect. Has this particular work been, for example, translated or made concise? And I'm doing it a disservice, obviously, by saying for children's storybooks, like a lot of other, like, for example, the Jungle Book, the Tarzan, etc., they've been made into storybooks, into popular culture, etc. So, has this work has had similar kind of reception?
Well, I mean, I'm not familiar with any children's stories. This happens later.
Yeah.
And in the 19th century, But if you're talking about in the Islamic world, no, we don't have children's stories. But of course, we have Robinson Crusoe, and we have the Jungle Book series, which is the same thing. The same thing. And then the Quranic stories all over the place, that Moses was placed in an ark, and wo bhi hai iske andar. To wo to hai na. I mean, it comes later, but it does come. It does come. Yes.
All
Yes.
right. Thank you. Dr. Moazzam, did you have a question? Dr. Shazia, can we get a mic over here? Yeah. Oh.
So I think, chal raha hai? Okay. So I think this entire debate about the development of rational thought, where that ends and where does inspiration begin, is highlighted as well perhaps in the Quran, in in the surah that we recite on Fridays. What is it? Surah Kahf, where Moses goes out with Joshua in search of where the two rivers meet. And that some have analyzed as the two rivers are the intellect and the inspiration. And in the first go, Moses here representing perhaps the epitome of intellect at that time, and knowledge, having been given, the commandments or being aware of that as part of rational moral thought. And in his haste, we are told that at a certain point, a dead fish comes to life and goes into the water, indicating some synergy, chemistry, something about the unknown there. The two of them miss that point there where the two rivers meet, and then later on realize that they have to backtrack, they have to slow down and look for the signs. And here then they meet Hazrat Khizr, representing divine inspiration or the unseen guide. And he is told that despite his very high status and rank of that time, he will not be able to be patient with things that he does not know. And here we're talking about unseen knowledge. To me, as a surgeon, as someone raised in science, it's very easy to understand that the unseen, 100 years ago, the bacteria were unseen, but we documented perhaps their secondary or tertiary influences in health and disease. 50 years ago, the virus was unseen. Correct me if I'm wrong, it may have been a little more time than that. So the electron microscope gave us that. So whatever is unseen for mankind is continuously evolving, and what is seen and documented is also evolving. And I think then perhaps there is, and as we see, Hazrat Musa goes through 3 episodes. The boy with the boat is capsized, the wall that is repaired but no muawaza is taken, and the young lad. Ji. So I think here we see in the Quran a very direct application of that, the had, or that limit of intellectual, rational thought based on what we can observe and measure, and that which we then cannot, and that is continuously changing.
I mean, let me make a comment, and it is that whatever you do, there's a leap of faith. There is a leap of faith. We cannot even explain scientific discoveries without that. A computer cannot discover what Newton discovered or what Einstein did. There is a leap of faith. तो वो तो है ही खैर. लेकिन एक बात आपको मैं ये बताऊँ, the historical point is that this is a highly eclectic work, and you see, in many ways, in fact, in fundamental ways, Islamic civilization is a synthetic civilization. It takes elements from the Greeks, it takes elements from the Persians, it takes elements from India, and then they all fall into the ocean of Islam and then turn into its own shape. This is something very important to understand. Now, we have Quranic references also in Hayy ibn Yaqzan, many of them. In fact, the poem of Faiz, which is very popular these days without people knowing the title, وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ, हम देखेंगे, लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे, وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ, तो उसमें है ना कि everything passes away and except the face of God that abides. And he quotes that everything passes away except the face of God. तो कुरानिक रेफरेंसेस भी हैं, एरिस्टोटल भी है, प्लेटो भी है, इब्न सीना भी हैं, इब्न सीना उनसे पहले कि इब्न सीना भी हैं उसके अंदर, इब्न रुश्द भी उसके अंदर है, गज़ाली भी उसके अंदर. Ghazali is very Ghazali. So it is an eclectic verse. So yes, it won't be at all surprising or implausible to say that it has a Quranic ground as well. It does have a Quranic ground. Yes, you're right. Hazrat Musa की कहानी भी तो है ना उनके जहन में, और फिर वो तो बिल्कुल ही वो जो mention तो उन्होंने किया ना कि वो जो कहानी है कि वो Moses was placed in an ark and then a tide took him away. वो तो कहानी इसमें है ना, मौजूद है. जी.
Yeah, so if I can just add to that, the stories that you're mentioning, they are open to a lot of interpretation. They're open to a lot of interpretation, and that is, I think, in some ways, the beauty of Scripture. But going back, I keep wanting to bring people back to the book. And you've noticed it's the beauty of the book, the nature of the questions that are being raised. With your permission, Noman-ul-Haq, this book, and I would suggest that you read it. It was written by a philosopher who was also a theologian. It was written within a particular political times where it's really, for those who have a philosophy background, this is really a thought experiment he is doing. He is laying this out to you, that here are these two ways. And, you read it and you make up your mind. I think one of the things, and perhaps this can be the last comment, is the reason, Noman-ul-Haq Sahab, that we had this is that these are areas that need to be talked about, because religion and this fight between religion and reason, etc., is an ongoing fight. And in this particular book, the choice that we had made, that let's just talk about it, would you, in your opinion, and then I think we will need to break, what is the main importance of this book? When you read it, you actually wrote about it. What are the essence, जो main चीजें इसमें हैं, जो आपको जो that you understand from it? If you could just tell us, what was it that fascinated you about this particular book, enough for you to write on it?
I mean, there are many things. One is this harmony that it brings about between faith and reason. That is very important. And then the harmony in different cultures, because as I said, this eclecticism, where you have Plato in one breath and the Quran in another, and you have Ibn-e-Sina in one breath and Aristotle in another. This is very interesting to me. This kind of this synthesis of ideas, and then something new coming out of it. And then narrative structure. I mean, I'm a man of literature basically. मुझे तो शायरी से दिलचस्पी है, तो उसका जो narrative structure बहुत खूबसूरत है. एक कहानी जैसे वो unfold होती है ना, वो कहानी. और ये सवाल बहुत अच्छा है सालिहा का, کہ وہ بچوں کے لیے کیوں نہیں کیا گیا. کیا جا اب بھی آپ کر دیجئے, کیا جا سکتا ہے. مجھ سے مدد لے لیجئے گا, میں آپ سے فیس نہیں لوں گا, مجھ سے ویسے ہی کام لے لیجئے گا. میں حاضر ہوں آپ کے
I
لیے
would love to, actually.
ترجمہ کرنے کے لیے. آپ اس کو کر دیں تو بہت ہی اچھا ہے. I mean, you know, Defoe already did it, Kipling already did it in his Jungle Book. تو یہ ہے, تو یہ دو تین باتیں ہیں کہ ایک تو harmonies between human products, and culture is a human product, harmony between this, and then here there's also harmony between my inner self and the larger cosmos, the microcosm and the macrocosm. میرے اندر جو جہان ہے وہ اور میرے باہر جو جہان ہے ان میں آپس میں جو ایک مناسبت ہے نا, that's also very interesting, you know, the harmony between the larger cosmos and my inner cosmos.
Thank you so much. If we have no more comments and